Hi, how you doing? My name's Tyler. I'm the Vice President of the Winthrop College Republicans.
And I'm Leslie Lovett. I'm the Secretary of Affairs here. And today it is our honor to introduce Attorney General Alan Wilson. He has really motivated me and encouraged me to get involved with politics and to really kind of establish my way in York County. And I really appreciate him for that and being with us today.
Thanks for having me, guys. It's great to be with you.
Yes, sir. The first question is, Mr. Attorney General, how did you get your start in law?
Well, I did not know I wanted to be a lawyer until late in college, and probably right after college is when I really committed to doing it. And I made a joke earlier today. I was speaking to a college group, and I said the reason I went to law school is because I was lousy at math. And if you look at the study of law, in the study of law, you can make an argument that 2 + 2 = 5 in law, and you may not get an A, but you can get a B if you make a good argument, right? In math and science, 2 + 2 has to equal 4, and if you have the wrong answer, the whole problem is wrong, right? Yeah. Well, in law, you can come to the wrong conclusion, but you can get credit for the analysis part, which is what the whole practice of law is about. And so I said, I like that. I like credit for trying. So I say that as a joke, but that was one of the things I like about law. I like the processes by which we arrive at solutions. And sometimes what is legally wrong today is legally permissible 20 years from now because the law is always involving. And I find that very fascinating. But I fell in love with law and the rule of law and the Constitution. And my first job after I clerked for a judge was as a prosecutor. And it was in that process that I just fell in love with the courtroom.
Well, kind of going off of that, what made you decide to run for the office of Attorney General?
Well, that's a great question. I loved being a prosecutor. I loved being in the courtroom. I loved really representing victims, people who'd been harmed in some way, and giving them their day in court and helping make them whole again. That was a tremendous amount of satisfaction I got from that. There was another part of me that loved public service. I'd gotten that from my years of working both in the party as well as being involved in local civic groups like Rotary and Kiwanis, and being a prosecutor is a form of public service, serving in the military, served a tour in Iraq. Those were things that really appealed to me. But then there was another component, leadership. I was looking for a leadership opportunity. Something that would challenge me, the ability to lead an organization. And when the Office of Attorney General became open, most people run for something before they run for a statewide office, but I just jumped in the deep end and decided to run for Attorney General because it basically brought together three things that I loved. It brought together public service, prosecution, and leadership. Those are the three kind of pillars of that office that I got to do all three things that I love doing at the same time. And so I offered my name, and I was fortunate and blessed enough to get elected.
How important are those three pillars to the South Carolina Supreme Court?
Well, listen, the state Supreme Court is extremely important. How we elect judges is equally important. People who sit in the court, they sit on criminal and civil matters, and they can, if you have the wrong judges on the court, they can choose to ignore the rule of law and basically make law as they go. And that has always been a concern I've had at the federal and the state level. That is why choosing the right judges to serve on the highest court is so important, because oftentimes you see judges at all levels of our government from all over the country. They just choose to ignore the law. I've seen it happen. I've seen judges not only ignore the law, but do the exact opposite of what the law said. So the process by which we elect judges is also equally important. In our state, it is completely and totally dominated by the legislative branch. The legislative branch basically controls the committee that vets all the candidates and nominates the candidates, and then once those candidates by that legislative committee are nominated, the legislature then votes on the candidates, and once they're sitting on the bench, the legislature approves the budget of the judiciary. I don't know about you guys, but in third grade I learned there how many branches of government? Three, right? Yeah. Well, where's the executive branch in that process? There is no check from that branch of government. And so you kind of get a warped sense of, listen, I start from the default position. Most men and women on the bench are good, honest people who want to do the right thing, whether I agree with them or not. Their intentions are good. But I don't trust the process. I don't have faith in the process the way I used to because I've seen too much. And so I think we need to inject that third branch of government in this selection of judges. We can do it in a way that keeps the General Assembly engaged. I don't believe in popular elections for judges, but I certainly think that all three branches should have an equal role in that process. We don't currently have that, and we're only one of 2 states in the entire country that does it this way.
Well, going into the importance of all three branches of government, during the primaries in South Carolina, you did a fantastic series of forums we talked to the presidential candidates, and I was lucky enough to go to a few of those. And so what did you kind of take out of hosting those events?
Well, first off, to get up close and personal to all the candidates, any one of whom could have been the nominee, it ended up being Donald Trump, and I got to interview him too and get to know him personally. But I got to really talk to them privately and publicly, and I got to let them, my interviews with them on stage weren't designed to be gotcha interviews like you get in the debate. Ask them some obscure question and see how they handle it. I actually told them up front, this is what I'm going to ask you in front of thousands of people. Because I wanted them to think about what their answer was going to be, and I wanted them to articulate that answer so that we could, and we filmed those answers, and I filmed Mr. Trump's answers, and his answers on the Supreme Court. Weeks before Justice Scalia died, we asked him what his judicial philosophy was and what type of justice he would want to appoint. Scalia was one of the people he used as a model. That was important to me. That was important to know. What people don't realize, we have 3, maybe 4 justices that will be in their 80s, or if they're not already in their 80s, they're in their 80s before the end of the term of the next president. So the next president could feasibly appoint up to 5 members of the Supreme Court based on age alone. It is going to forever transform the court beyond my lifetime if we don't have the right president, and if you have people who are appointing judges who try to make policy from the bench. It's not a judge's role to make policy. That's the legislative and executive branch. The court's job is to interpret the laws to be in compliance with the policies that the other 2 branches dictate. But we oftentimes have a Supreme Court at the federal level who wants to make policy, and that is not the right way to govern.
I think it's important to emphasize that how lasting the impact of the Supreme Court is. I mean, Clarence Thomas was appointed by George H.W. Bush, and he's on the Supreme Court now. So I mean, someone who's appointed now will be around by the time my kids are getting my age. So I mean, it really is a lasting impact having an appointment on the Supreme Court.
This month we're celebrating the 25th anniversary of the confirmation of Clarence Thomas. The reason I know that is I was there on the U.S. Senate floor the night he was confirmed. I was a page for Strom Thurmond, and I saw that process of vetting up close and personal. And what I learned from that year in 1991 is that this is so important. It is the most important thing a president can do, is nominate a person for the Supreme Court. There is no greater legacy than the footprint that a president leaves on the high court, because that legacy, that footprint lasts for decades beyond that president's time in office. And so that is why we got to get this election right.
Well, kind of moving on from the political spectrum of things, we get to some more personal things. What is something about you that you would say not many people know about you?
I'm a science fiction geek. On the weekends, my wife and I watch Hallmark movies because we're hopeless romantics. A couple of things are right there about me that not a lot of people know. I'm a diehard fan of The Walking Dead. Watch it every Sunday night, and I'm still reeling from Sunday night. No spoiler alerts for the folks at home, but if you miss Sunday night, I had to go outside and get a breath of air because it was a gut punch.
It was hard. That was hard after those few months of waiting for, and then you finally got like, oh, I wasn't prepared for that. So that was,
But my son is now 8 years old, 8.5, and he's old enough to go to most of the kind of movies that I want to go see, which are like Marvel movies, comic book, DC movies, movies involving superheroes and science fiction characters. And one of my favorite things to do is take my kids to the movies to watch those science fiction movies. I really love doing that with him. But I am a sci-fi geek and I'm a fantasy geek. I like The Walking Dead and things like that. But I also have a hopeless romantic side to me. I probably shouldn't be saying that publicly on film here, but I like the guy movies. But my wife and I, we watch a romantic comedy from time to time.
I've been in your office, and you do have a lot of Star Wars apparel.
Yeah, Star Wars, Battlestar Galactica, Firefly, Serenity. I mean, all of it.
I love Star Wars too.
Yeah.
How does Star Wars shape your view on politics?
See, now you told me you were going to ask me this question, and I've been thinking of an answer, and I just don't even know how to answer that question. A lot of people look at the philosophy that's behind Star Wars, the religious significance, the philosophical significance. I just look at it on its face. It's good versus evil, redemption, things like that. Honestly though, in politics, when you watch Star Wars, you got a good side and you got a bad side. In politics, I try not to see the dark and the light. I look at someone who's my opponent in politics, and I try not to see them as evil. Right. I try to always start from a position that they mean well, even if what they want to accomplish is is not good policy, I try to at least give them the benefit of having the right intentions. So it's not, I don't so much learn that from Star Wars, but I'm using it as an illustration. In Star Wars, there's the dark side and then there's the light side, right? In politics, to me, there are shades of gray because, I believe that somebody wants to give a government handout because they truly want to help someone who's less fortunate. I want to help that person who is less fortunate, but I believe just carte blanche handouts have more long-term detrimental impacts on that individual and hurt them and their community far worse. And so we both want to help the person, but we're just disagreeing on how. Does that make one of us the good guy and one of us the bad guy? No. And oftentimes I find that when you look at people who are in the opposite party from you or have an opposition point of view from what you have, once you make them your enemy, you have written them off and you've forced them to write you off. And there are going to be plenty of opportunities for you two to come together in the future and compromise. If you and I disagree on an issue, but I can get you to compromise on 60 to 70% of that issue, why would I say all or nothing when I can get 60% of what I want? Now, I will come for that 40% next year, but if you're willing to give me 60%, then I'm going to work with you, and I'm going to give you credit for meeting me at least a little past halfway.
See, this is why we have the best interview show there is, because we just had a deep philosophical discussion involving Star Wars. I mean, you won't get that anywhere else. I mean, have you ever been asked a political question about Star Wars in an interview before?
No, this is the first one, and when you told me you were going to ask me about Star Wars, I'm like, wow. Now you did ask me about, I've seen the previews for Rogue One, which is the spin-off Star Wars show, and I am really excited. I'm not going to lie, I was a little disappointed in Episode 7. I thought it was a rehash. It had a couple of issues. I'm not going to use this video to talk about why it's not as good a Star Wars as it could have been, but Rogue One, I'm really excited. I can't wait to take my son to see it here when it comes out.
Well, talking about, I guess, younger people, how do you get young people out to vote? Because a lot of times people in our generation are very cynical about the democratic process. So what would be your message to younger voters?
Let me take a step back from that question and kind of put an answer in here that's larger. I was reading a Wall Street Journal article the other day in which they talked about millennials, people between the ages of 18 and 29, which is your generation. They are now voting. 70 million millennials are now voting that are between those age brackets. They did a poll of millennials, and in that poll they determined that about a third, over 30% of millennials, believe that socialism is a good thing. And not even half, like in the high 40 percentile of millennials, think capitalism is a good thing. Then they did another poll where they asked the question, how do you feel about government-managed markets as opposed to free markets? When they defined socialism as government-managed, they got 49% thought it was good. But when they called capitalism free markets, that jumped to 72%. So it went from somewhere in the 40 percentile range all the way to 72%. So what it told me is that millennials, demographically speaking, think they know what socialism is, but they don't. They think capitalism is bailouts, government bailouts, crony capitalism, payoffs, golden parachutes for people who run companies in the ground. That's not capitalism, but that's what they think it is, and that's why they're running to people like Bernie Sanders. They don't understand that socialism destroys countries. No country that's ever based its economy on socialism has ever prospered. I think it was Winston Churchill, and I'm going to get this quote wrong, but Winston Churchill said, the inherent vice of capitalism is the unequal distribution of blessings. The inherent vice of capitalism is the unequal distribution of blessings. The inherent vice of socialism is the equal distribution of misery. And if you think about that quote, it's extremely profound. But we've got to message to the millennials that socialism is not a good thing and capitalism isn't a bad thing like they think it is. That's probably why a lot of millennials don't feel as engaged, because they don't even understand the definitions to the terms of the things they're talking about. And I was talking to some students the other day at another college here in South Carolina, and we were talking about economics. They're taking an economics class, and they're learning about Keynesian economics, which is basically pouring money, and the government pours money to stimulate the economy. They're not learning about the free market. They're not learning about Milton Friedman. I mean, they're not learning about Hayek or the Austrian School of Economics. They're learning about a liberal form of economics that doesn't work, and they're not being taught the other side. And so they become part of the voting class, and they elect the people that pass those policies. That is why we have got to educate millennials and young people that are entering the voting pool so that they can reflect those values of the voting booth.
Well, we want to thank you so much for taking some time out of your day to do this interview with us. We really, really appreciate it.
Yeah. You guys are my future. You're my kids' future, because one day I'm going to be an old guy sitting on the couch at home, and y'all are going to be running the show. So I'm honored that y'all wanted to interview me to get my insights, and I appreciate what you guys are doing in college, and I appreciate what you're going to be doing as you go forward in life. And I look forward to watching both of you progress. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Guys.
Thank you, sir.